It's the Kink Consultant podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Kink Consultant podcast. I am delighted to introduce Dove of Littlespace as my guest today. Welcome, Dove.
Thank you. Hi.
You are an Instagram creator and educator for littles and people interested in exploring their little side.
A little bit like caregiver dynamic as well, overarching, but yeah.
So we were introduced through a mutual friend, or at least I found you through a mutual friend, and I love your content. I've been wanting to have you on for a while because you're just doing so many interesting things in the space. So in the past year, I think since I started following you, you've released a book. You have a course that you're offering as well for littles and exploring your little side.
So the first course now is just for littles because you can explore that side solo. And one day there will be a caregiver little dynamic course probably, but not now.
I would love to hear more about your journey of how did you discover you were a little?
Honestly, I was just reading romances. I had a time that was kind of difficult. I was just moving a lot, etc. And I just found romance books to be such a good escape. So I was reading so many books. And at some point, one of the books had a spanking scene. In the spanking scene of that romance book, I was like, this is so freaking hot. I didn't know about kink, okay? And so I was like, this is so hot. This is the hottest thing. I reread that 2 or 3 times. I touched myself to it, obviously. It was very hot. And then I was like, I want to read more books that have these kind of descriptions. And so I discovered through that BDSM books, DS dynamic ones, and domestic discipline. That was the discovery. And then from there, at some point, without knowing it, I started a book that I thought would be, I think, a domestic discipline one. And it ended up having a like daddy dom little girl dynamic in it without calling it that, which was a great introduction. It was non-sexual and it was without calling the daddy and the little, which made it really soft for me. But I was like, something's different in that connection. And that was kind of the start, because then I was like, read from that author more, and she had books that had more explicit DDLG things. And then I read more different things. I was just like, at first I was like, I feel so much shame, but at the same time, this really speaks to me. And so this was my introduction, was actually reading.
There's so much that you said that now I'm like, I'm really excited because obviously I love spanking and had similar experiences. The shame is really difficult to navigate.
Because it's actually my little side was something that I was so hard trying to suppress and that I disliked very much that it would come out so much in relationships. So it was something that I felt was wrong with me, and that I would even tell my partner, like, I don't know, this keeps coming up, this kind of like high-pitched voice and behavior, and I would try to like suppress that. And so because it was such a shameful part, I thought something's kind of wrong with me. And so reading it, I was kind of feeling ashamed for the character in the book, like especially when it started being obvious little daddy dom little girl books. The first one was a soft introduction because it wasn't as obvious. Then when it became more like apparent and very childlike behavior, etc., I was like, oh, I'm feeling so ashamed for that character, but I also need to continue reading this.
Do you think you were projecting shame onto the character?
Absolutely.
Because you felt embarrassed that you also wanted this?
Yeah, because I taught myself so much that this was wrong. So yeah.
As a spanko, someone who has a spanking fetish, I can't orgasm without thinking about spanking or punishment. It's interesting that no one told me to be ashamed of that. There was just something where I knew it wasn't quote unquote normal, so I felt shame. Or did you get messages that being a little was shameful or wrong?
At first, I didn't. Like, my first partner, for example, was totally accepting of it, and I just freaked out for myself, especially when hearing recordings. I think at some point he took a video of me frolicking in the forest with him, and I was like, I sound so stupid, and I just really disliked this. So at first, I didn't get any of that messaging. I do remember one partner, we were together only for a few months, but one moment my little came out because I started to feel safer with him, and he freaked. Like, he didn't like that at all, and I could see, because I had kind of the sensor of being not accepted. I was like, oh, this is bad. We didn't stay together anyway. It wouldn't have worked, honestly. It wasn't the reason we separated, but I think it would have become.
What does it mean to you to be a little?
I would say it's this like connection to a more childlike side of me. It comes with, if I really let myself fall into it, it comes with a lot of presence. I feel like the worries and everything go away, and a lot of joy and expressiveness. I'll tell my partner so many times, I love you, and I will tell like the most amount of unhinged kind of emotional like affection, but also more unhinged kind of poutiness or being annoyed. There's less filter and more presence in terms of I'm right here in that moment, and I find more joy maybe also in more random things, day-to-day things, or yeah, so it's connected kind of to joy and to presence and to childlike excitement, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. So when we talk about littles, do you directly correlate it to age play?
Can you tell me what age play is for you when you say age play?
Thank you for asking. Yeah. For me, age play is role playing a younger age because it's not about regressing back to that age per se. It's more playing the role. Even if you deeply feel it, it's if I were to do it, I think I would probably age play or role play a teenager in high school who's getting spanked for not doing their homework by their teacher. For me, it's not to do with being a little, it's just about playing a different age, and it lends itself to the role play that I want to do as a student. How do you think age play comes into Littlespace, if at all? Do you view them as completely separate?
I don't view them as the same thing, and I think it really depends on the people. So for me, my expression of littleness in and out of the bedroom is nothing to do with age play. I'm not role playing anything. I might be leaning into this side of me, but I'm not role playing it. And then sometimes I might be leaning into a little bit of that role play, a bit in a method acting kind of way, or I'll try things on. Yeah, or I'll be like seeing, okay, I'm going to try this toy, I'm going to try this thing, and see how it feels in accordance with my little side. But I don't really feel like I'm acting. But they can sometimes sometimes the lines get blurry, or you lean into one thing or whatever. It's very little age play and a lot more like just the natural leaning into this identity. And if I'm playing with someone also non-sexually, like I'm talking about both in and out of the bedroom, right? The other person will also lean into that identity that they have, and they're not acting like anything specific. It's just leaning into the identity.
As a caretaker, the other person being the
Yeah,
caretaker.
which I like. I know that now, and I do that a lot as well. Caregiver little is being used a lot more than Daddy Dom Little Girl, because it's as an acronym, because it's a lot more
Inclusive.
exactly. The only thing that I dislike about the new name that is being used, even though I use it as well because I also want to include all genders, is that the caregiver word is a bit limiting to what I like in a counterpart. For me, the Daddy Dom fits the character more because caregiver kind of limits the person to that caregiving quality. And I think that daddy or Daddy Dom, usually we understand more that there's more elements of a Dom in it, where a caregiver might feel a lot softer and dynamic in a way. So I like that it's inclusive, but I don't think it's a perfect word.
That makes a lot of sense. Labels are imperfect because of that. So it's more like labels are umbrellas, and then there are different things underneath with their own unique attributes. Okay, so when you go into Littlespace, and every time you talk about it, I relate to my need to be punished and how I'm not role playing a bad girl. It's just how I am. I view it as the most authentic version of myself because I'm not masking, I'm not pretending to be normal, which is something that I spent a lot of my younger years doing because I've known I was into this since I was 5 years old, and I've been hiding it for many years before I was out. You described kind of finding this a little later in life. Reading is what opened you up to this. But in hindsight, were there signs?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as I told you, it was out in my relationships anyway. And then my longest relationship, we were vanilla by default, but we had elements of this kind of creeping in frequently. We also accidentally explored kink without knowing that it was that, like quite a bit, but it was almost by mistake, just like randomly. Oh, this was really good, but we don't know why. And it was like, oh, he had been like holding the space and instructing me a lot, and that's why it worked. So for me, discovering kink and discovering little was within a month or two of each other. So I kind of discovered both in a very short amount of time. It was like, oh, I now understand DS and BDSM. And now, oh, now I understand little and this completely thing that I was ashamed of. And oh, all these things opened up at the same time. But I definitely also saw so many movie scenes that I had loved and watched and rewatched. You know, and you like compulsively just rewatch the same little scene because the actor or actress acts in a particularly dominant way or a particular caregiver way or whatnot, and talks to the other person in such a way that is so juicy. And I would just watch and rewatch certain scenes. And now I'm like, oh, that's why I was so obsessed with some of these characters and some of these scenes specifically of that little moment in that movie. And now I'm like, ah.
Can you give me any examples of movies that you felt?
Yeah, so one I can think of right now is, for example, in The Golden Compass, which is more of a children's movie. So you will have more like caregiver little dynamics with actual adults talking to children in movies. And what I was interested in was the adult talking. And Nick Kidman in that movie sometimes interacts with a girl and puts her hand under her chin and says a few things to her, or it also gets a bit strict with her and tells her like, you have to take off this shoulder bag, and if we have an argument I will win, and just gets kind of stern with her. And I would watch certain scenes so much from that one movie, even that, because Nicole Kidman did such a good job being a little bit scary and at the same time like really beautiful.
And she was putting boundaries in place, and sort of there was a safety in that she was looking out for this person.
She was the bad guy.
Did that add to it, the fact that she was the bad guy?
No, I think it just didn't matter to me because in that moment the person is talking that way and that's all I care about.
But just to be clear, there's no age that you are as a little.
I think I kind of have a range of my little expression, and so sometimes I can purposefully also lean into some of these things. I would say my most common, easily accessed, kind of frequent age, if I could call it so, would be around 10. In terms of the activities that I would like to do and maybe the way I behave would be closer to a 10-year-old. But then if I'm maybe using a pacifier or just leaning into it, or I'm being very tired or whatever, maybe I've had an intensity and whatever, I might go smaller and feel much younger and also become much more sensitive to certain movies. For example, like if I go really, really small, I wouldn't be able to even watch a Disney movie. They're too intense already. Yeah, and then I sometimes might lean into a more teenage type of character and feel like a rebel and put on some kind of music and a band t-shirt or something and feel really cool, like a cool teenage girl. But that's just less frequent. It happens too, and I sometimes lean into that. It's more like there's a range and there's a bit of depth of vulnerability and how quickly I can get in and out of these states.
Would you say that you're little, based on this caretaker little, daddy dom little explanation, it sounds like you are the submissive. Would you say that that's true?
When I'm with someone else, because I do enter Littlespace alone, but when I'm with someone else, yes, I'm definitely also submissive.
I love that you said you entered alone, right? Because this is something that can be explored alone. How do you explore it on your own? When you're in Littlespace, what does that look like for you? How do you explore it?
It really changes depending on my mood and depending on whatever is going on in my life. But I might have a certain type of activities that I might like to do for a while. So maybe for a time I might be really into building Lego or doing some coloring. I sometimes will leash myself actually to physically kind of feel a bit more contained in the space and set up maybe a blanket on the floor and be like, this is my space now. I have had different kind of toys or activities or things that I like to do, and then there are times when I don't do anything. I might just lay down and be like, okay, this is my time to be small, and I lay there. And it really depends on how much of a stretch it is from the way I've been all day to that space, because this is more brain off, in the moment kind of state. So sometimes if I'm being go, very boss babe type character, it might be a bit more difficult sometimes to switch gears and go small. So then I might need more help with myself. I might even start with taking a shower and kind of slowing down, and then maybe have more visual helps as well, or physical. I also think sometimes having a pacifier in for myself when I'm alone really helps, because it gives me something that I can feel in my mouth and it kind of stops my talking and it creates that physical sensation that kind of helps me. Especially if I'm alone, it can help. Yeah, I'm not as much of a movie person. Sometimes I'll do it. I'll have a very cute series. I used to watch for a time Easy's Koala World, which is 10-minute episodes, lots of koalas, adorable. I would watch that, but otherwise I'm oftentimes not very interested in TV and these kind of things. When I'm wanting to regress for myself or to enter the headspace for myself, I want to be careful with not calling it age regression because it's used in a different context.
I think we should talk about that. Age regression is used in a different context, often therapeutically to help people process something, where they are taken to that space by someone else, I feel, or like guided more.
They can also do it alone, but yeah. Age regression is generally used not in the context of that lifestyle of kink. And it can also be something that people experience involuntarily, where they'll be in the headspace and they don't really have control over it. I always know that I'm in the headspace that I'm in. I always could get out of it. Like, my adult brain is still observing me to a degree, especially like on many levels of littleness. I can get out.
No, that makes so much sense. That I think that's a really great differentiator. Is your adult brain is still present and can take over. It's a very conscious decision for you to
Yeah.
be in this
And
space or indulge this space.
yeah, and it's a bit maybe like subspace. Sometimes you kind of go so deep into subspace, you can say, yeah, a submissive, after a certain level, their consent is really hard to really take for as it is, for example. So if you wouldn't go for consent in a sub that's already in subspace. And I feel like with the little headspace, it's similar. You would have conversations about things beforehand, because even though I can get out of the headspace or I still have my adult brain on, it can be harder sometimes depending how deep in it I am. But it's still so that I'm conscious that I'm in that headspace and I'm aware, yeah.
Do you think you go deeper into that space when you have your daddy dom present?
It is easier to more often do that. It's easier to have the other person holding space and to have that contrast. Like a dom, a daddy dom, or caregiver, it's just like someone else providing contrast. So it kind of is easier to then be the opposite of what they are in that moment and to go smaller when they're being big and tall and holding the space. Sometimes a voice and someone saying something can be such an easy trigger point. But I would say I've had also really deep, really beautiful little times alone as well. And sometimes being alone can open the possibility to try things out that might feel a bit of an edge or a bit shameful in that moment, or a bit like, oh, I don't know yet if I really want to try that with someone else yet. Or, you know, at the very beginning when I found out about Little, for about a month, I was truly just spending time with myself, first coloring in and trying little things and feeling better with that. And at some point I felt more open to talk about it and to open up to someone else. But it was kind of helpful for me to be in my own little private space first. Yeah, it is easier generally to go small with someone else because they can hold the space.
I totally understand, though, how doing it on your own allows you to explore things that you get to be comfortable with it first yourself before letting it out in front of somebody else.
Just less self-consciousness.
Yes, I envy it because my fetish is very tied to needing someone else present. I need the dom to counteract my sub side that is usually acting out, but I can only act out if someone is there to bear witness to it. Even not physically, but there's very little to explore on my own.
Well, actually, for me, I like to sometimes, when I'm doing my little time alone, I like to sometimes just imagine someone else is there. It's very fun because then I get to have them say what fits in the moment. And so, yeah, sometimes it's helpful. If I feel like I need a little bit more space holding, I'll just imagine someone's actually sitting there and maybe saying something to me. But I have a very like easy imagination, so it's quite easy. I could literally really imagine there's someone else. I'm not hallucinating, but like can create an image and a voice and an attitude, and then it will help.
Can I ask how you met your daddy dom?
So him and I were together for 5 years. Then I discovered kink and BDSM and little things. There was quite a lot of turmoil after that, and so we ended up separating. We tried a bit dynamic after, like around the very, very end, but it was very rushed and it was already a lot of things had been complicated. So we separated, and for a year I was playing with other people. I met one person through social media, and I met one person through going to like a shibari performance, and I met someone else through a dating app. Like I was just dating, and I had also a long-term friend, a female friend. Her and I ended up playing together. Now that I was into kink, we suddenly had like also an attraction to each other, which was fun with the safety of the friendship. And then my current partner is actually the 5-year relationship person. We ended up reconnecting after a year, and during that time he'd been also exploring his dominant side and actually finding his authentic side of it, and having it not be a reaction of me finding it, but really like himself actually realizing like, oh, this is me as well. Like I'm truly this dominant person too. And he didn't know we were gonna get back together, and he still discovered it. And basically after about over a year, we reconnected and started to re-explore the relationship. We'd both grown in also other aspects that had been difficult before, and we were careful because I know it's not great to get back with your ex. Like it can often be not the best idea, but it actually was. It's been over half a year now, and we're really just really strong and really, really happy me. And the relationship has never been better, and the dynamic is great too. And it has this like depth that of the fact that we'd been together for that long before.
That 1 year gave you both a lot of freedom to explore this independently, the way you both wanted to, and you came to something more organic. I've had relationships end specifically because of my interest in BDSM and kink. Like, the more I discovered in younger years, the more it drove a wedge between me and my partner. That's one of the reasons my ex-husband and I ended. And for me, that led to a lot of shame. More shame than I already felt, because it sort of proved to me, oh, I'll never be happy if I'm kinky. Luckily, I have disproven for myself now. But when your relationship ended for that 1 year, did more shame creep in? Like, how did it feel knowing that this was part of you and a relationship ended?
All right, Kinkster, let's talk about pleasure. Not just mine, yours too. If you're enjoying this episode of the Kink Consultant, I need you to do me a little favor, and I promise it'll feel oh so good. Take a second and give this podcast a 5-star rating. Just imagine your finger sliding all over that 5th star, pressing down, giving it exactly the kind of attention it deserves. Yeah, that's it. And you know what happens when you do? I get all hot and bothered knowing you're out there, showing your appreciation. Plus, every time you leave a review, a naughty little brat somewhere gets that spanking they've been begging for. So be a good listener and tap that star, won't you? Thanks, love. Now let's get back to the fun.
So the finding out that I was a little, it was more a catalyst for me to grow even more into who I was, and some of the dysfunctions of the relationship became more apparent. And the relationship didn't actually break because of this because I'm a little. It was more like a lot of turmoil was created through this, but therefore I didn't feel shame, I think, because I reached for community very quickly. I started talking with people, and I really affirmed this side of me very early on. Like, I read, and then I started reaching out to people. And I also relatively quickly started my Instagram page. So I had so much response of like, you're fine.
So how did you even know to find community? Because that is one of the number one pieces of advice I give people. I get a lot of questions of, well, how do you find community? It's almost like you found it so easily.
First of all, online, just the reassurance of listening to other people talk through podcasts is one thing. I think it can help a lot. And then I'm listening to real people talk on podcasts. So, okay. And then I looked at events. I'm lucky to right now live in Berlin, and it's a very kinky city. And even though within kink and BDSM, the caregiver little aspect is not that much, it still is something where I was able to meet some people, and I was able to also meet people who were into DS. So that was much easier to find such people. So I went to Munches, and I went to some Shibari classes. I went to Impact workshop to learn how to give and learn more about that. And then doing the Instagram kind of created that as well. So it's a mix of things. And then through the Instagram, obviously, because it's very little oriented, then I also heard other littles talk. I think I met 2 people then through the Instagram as well.
When did you start your Instagram in relation to this journey?
I was still in the relationship when the Instagram happened. It's only, I think, so I read the books, and I think it took a month of reading BDSM books until I found the little books. And then it was another month of reading the little books, then a month of listening to podcasts, then a month of talking to this other person, this experienced caregiver type. And then I started the Instagram account. So it was very early, and that's why at the beginning I had a post out every day. Because for 2 months I was posting a post every day because I was learning so much, and I had so much to express. When I'm learning something, I want to kind of create something out of that. And so the outlet that I found was just making these posts.
I mean, from my own Instagram too, it's just such a good way to express ourselves and what we're thinking. And it feels less lonely especially when you get comments, positive comments of like, oh, I feel this way too, or I understand. That feels really good. So not only were you finding community, you were creating community.
Yes.
How long has your Instagram been up?
So somewhat over 2 years, maybe 2 years and a few months.
How much would you say that your Littlespace is a part of your sexuality?
I think for me, it can be two different things. Like I can be in a little headspace and absolutely not interested in sexuality. And then sometimes I can be in a little headspace, and the fact that I'm so relaxed and trusting and in the moment can make me actually more susceptible to be also open to sexuality. Because I think a lot of times what can happen is that some things will stand in the way of feeling lustful or of wanting it, rather than needing so much stimulation for it. It's more needing things to remove the obstacles and to remove like the worries, to remove the day-to-day grind. And because when I'm in a little headspace, I'm much more present and I'm relaxed and everything, I can sometimes be more quickly open to go into sexuality. So it's kind of more that. Yeah, and if I'm cuddling with my partner, sometimes I start to be a little horny, but generally it's more that I'm just more receptive and relaxed in the moment. I want to give an example of something where I'm feeling maybe super relaxed and I just want to have his penis in my mouth but not move. I almost like a soother, and he'll be maybe even not hard yet, and I'll just be like, can I please? And I'll lay my head on his belly and just have his penis in my mouth, and maybe he's even on his phone or pretending to be on his phone because it's part of what's fun when it's like very casual. But then he'll slowly get hard and sometimes move a bit in my mouth, and then it will very slowly at some point lead to more. But in the moment where I ask, can I have your penis in my mouth, I'm not trying to initiate. I'm not even thinking about the next moment necessarily. And I also always know that I can stop whatever's happening if it was ever to be uncomfortable for me. But it will be this very slow, gradual, kind of super innocent start that will become more and more like sexual and explicit. And yes, it will start with me just being like wanting something in my mouth, which is actually a very little thing in that moment for me, which is it's very soft, very beautiful. It smells nice because I'm on his belly, it's comfortable and warm, and we're cuddling, and like suddenly I'm like, oh, I would love this. And so yeah, in that way they can sometimes also merge. And I want to say like some littles feel like they have a very strong like little space, doesn't feel sexual, and then they're still submissive maybe, or some littles might not be part of the lifestyle at all. But in the way that I talk about it, it's littles who are part of the DS lifestyle generally, or the BDSM. But for me, it definitely is something where in some headspaces it's sexual, in some it is just open to sexuality.
I really relate to it specifically because of my own spanking fetish. Of everything you described, you could just insert the word spanking and punishment, and I would be like, yes, sometimes it is its own thing. Sometimes it leads to sex because I feel my head is finally clear and I'm turned on. Because for me it's a fetish, I need to think about punishment and spanking, like it needs to be part of it to have sex, but I can just have the punishment and spanking without it ever leading to sex. As you're describing Littlespace, it sort of sounds like the same thing. And then it's almost like Schrodinger's foreplay of this could be foreplay or it might not be foreplay when he's in your mouth, but oftentimes it leads to more.
Exactly, yes. And I do not need to be little though to feel like sexual or to enter sexual play.
That makes a lot of sense because for you then, this is more of a kink and something that you enjoy as opposed to something you need to achieve orgasm or to have sex.
Yeah, I feel like being little itself is not the kink, but maybe what is a kink is just hearing someone talk to me in specific ways. Like just me being little doesn't necessarily make me feel kinky. It's just like the way he will interact with me sometimes is just super hot. Or even that friend of mine who's a woman, like I'm slightly bisexual, but I lean way more towards man, but except when it comes to kink. And if a woman is dominant, I'm like, it doesn't matter that you're a woman. You're suddenly the hottest person ever. And I mean, she's beautiful. She's a beautiful woman, but I'll be suddenly way more interested also even in her body and everything because suddenly I've been talked to in that way. I've been interacted to in that way. So
it activated something in your brain that sends you to a place, your little space.
Yeah, little and sub in that moment.
A lot of people who hear about littles think that anyone who engages in this dynamic is into pedophilia. For me, the reason that's absolutely not true is because the consent aspect. You're an actual adult.
Yeah, as I said to you earlier before we started, I like to compare it with, so a lot of people who think of that are also kinksters. Even kinksters will be very judgmental of the CGL, specifically even the DDLG dynamic, they will think of also men wanting to be with little girls in an actual way. And the way that I like to compare it is in kink and especially in sadomasochism, we're engaging in things that look like abuse. And what everybody will say is, well, the difference is there's a conversation about it. There's a safe word. There's consent. These are adults and nobody's harming anyone. We're careful in the practices that we're doing. At least it's risk aware, etc. All of those things make it not abuse. And that's the same things apply. This might look from the external sometimes confusing if someone is dressed up in a certain way, even though they might have a very, shaped body, a very adult body, but whatever, like if someone is dressed a certain way, whatever, it might look a certain way. Are we suddenly liking this very infantile way of looking because the person is actually wishing for something else? But it's usually more to do with the energy behind it. The energy of that little is being very present, it's being very sweet, it's being very vulnerable. So there's a lot of intimacy in it. The dominant part is getting to hold a big space and is getting to feel really good about holding that space, about making this possible as well. And it's a play in that moment. But the big difference with anything is, of course, is consenting adults. There's been conversations about it. And obviously, some people might do this without conversations and then it's abuse. It's just like with kink. Some people might hide behind certain terms and say, like, I'm a dom, but they're actually just using that to be a predator. In that same way, in this space, you have to be careful as well about people who say they're daddy doms. And sometimes it's just misinformation, like daddy doms thinking they're doing it right and just forgetting about more of those conversations. But there's conversation, there's safe word, there's care, there's going slowly into things and all of that. And it's consenting adults.
Yeah, I mean, the consent is everything, but you also talked about asking the right questions or having the right conversations. And I do want to ask you general advice, but if someone is a little or vice versa, a caretaker, and they want to vet a potential partner, what kinds of questions would you suggest they ask?
So for me as a little, because I was doing some online dating as well for a time, what I would ask is, what's your previous experience? I would also ask if they had done any workshop or research or they were into specific podcasts. And I would usually ask that, in a way that they don't feel pressured and they don't feel like they have to have the right answer. But in that way, I would know whether it's someone who's interested in learning or not. I also see, like, how is someone writing about it? How are they interacting with me? Are they open to hearing feedback? I think sometimes when it comes to dominance and littles, especially when you're vetting someone that might not have a lot of experience, it's important to look for character traits more so than what they already know, because if they're open to conversation, if they're open to learning, and if they really want to do good with you, then they will be able to learn. Whether you redirect them to other information or not, they will be able to also hear feedback and react properly to feedback. And so I feel like sometimes people focus so much on, well, is this person already calling you little girl in that moment? But maybe that person has never heard that that's a thing you shouldn't do. Sometimes people are misinformed, and it doesn't always mean that they are fake or that they mean or that they're trying to take advantage. Sometimes they're just misinformed and they haven't really had much time, or they haven't known that they needed to inform themselves. And sometimes just looking for character is more important, especially if you want to not only play with someone, but you really want a relationship. It needs to fit on many levels. Well, even for play, but sometimes for play, you might maybe look for an experienced dominant. But I feel like for relationships, sometimes it's like, okay, well, maybe this person, we match on so many points and they have a great character, and we just will have to go slow and start slow and be patient and develop this slowly. And they might have a little bit more to learn, and we come to be then at some point able to do all the things. I don't know.
Looking at people's character, that's sort of important in dating and meeting people in general. You have to have some empathy and give them grace and space to figure it out or be willing to learn. The thing I always say is I want to look for curiosity. I want to find someone who's curious, because if they're curious, they're willing to learn.
Yes, curious, and very much to what response do they give to when you set a boundary or when you give a feedback. Because I think some people might be really prideful and react like kind of angrily, especially people who say, yeah, I'm a dom and everything. And sometimes they might lack a bit of humility. And so I look also for that. Like, how does someone react to feedback given gently? But it's just a great point of, okay, and do they try and push any kind of limit that you set? Because even someone who's not so informed, like, they shouldn't be someone that goes and try and push limits that you've set.
They should respect the boundaries.
Yes, exactly.
Otherwise, that's a red flag. You have to be willing to put in the time to explore, because the perfect person probably isn't just going to come out of nowhere. I always say you teach people how to love you. Sometimes you teach people how to be your perfect partner or a suitable partner, especially when you have what I'm going to say are niche interests. So sometimes you have to teach people about that.
Yeah, even if someone already has experience with littles, every person is different. The way I explore my little side is, first of all, can be different today than it will be in a year. But second of all, every person will be different. So it's always good to be curious and open, and everybody has to ask those questions.
And if you were to give more general advice for someone who might be where you were 2 years ago, or even 2.5 years ago, about exploring, like someone who just discovered that they have a little side or things they might, what advice would you give to that person?
It's nice to start with maybe an activity or something that gives you a bit of a framework where you're like, is there something that I'm interested in trying or that maybe I've been curious about? For example, I don't know, maybe you want to get a stuffed animal. I didn't have stuffed animals from the age of 10 until like, I don't know, 25 or something. Like I didn't have a stuffed animal. And then it was the first time in my life that I bought one when I entered littleness. So maybe trying a coloring book or trying something that you feel could be fun or that you used to like as a child even, and just picking up maybe that activity or that sensation, like the stuffed animal or a certain food that you might have thought is shameful to want, or certain series that you used to love as a child and you haven't watched in a long time. Just like trying simple things and I give something to do and seeing how it feels and not putting any pressure to enter any type of headspace. But also you might have found, especially if you've had relationships as a little, you might have found that there was something that would come up again, like maybe a higher pitched voice, just a type of behavior where you didn't really understand what it was, and just being able to reflect back on that and being like, okay, maybe it wasn't so wrong. And so when it happens, now I can maybe judge it differently and label it differently.
I am really glad that you have a course out there for people who want to explore their little side. Who did you make the course for?
I made the course for littles who already have had some contact with their little side, who maybe they've had like a first relationship with someone with whom they now discovered they were little and then now discovering it. I know a lot of littles also enter a first dynamic and then they break up and then they're like, oh, I not only separated from this person, but I also don't know what to do now because I don't know how to connect with this side of me alone. So I feel like I've lost both the person and a part of me that I had good contact with.
Yeah.
Or littles who are even already like they've been in this for a while and they just want to explore more, or they only do it in dynamic but they want to have the opportunity to sometimes doing it alone. So it's definitely for littles who might have already done the first few steps of exploring some things. They're just like, oh, I want more. I want to explore more. I want more kind of context on this. I want some inspiration. I want to be kind of taken by the hand. And I want to be able to give myself that alone as well, so I can really own this part of my identity and not make it completely something that is only connected to someone else, but it's really mine.
That is such an empowering message and course, I imagine then. Okay, amazing. And for anyone who wants to access that course, you can find it at littlespaces.co.
I do want to just say maybe something like another myth that is around like people thinking little looks one way. They might look at certain aesthetics and they might look at on the internet and see other littles who are wearing onesies or having everything pink or having a million of stuffies and maybe a very girly type of or a very baby type of design and aesthetic. And they're like, oh, I feel so connected to the dynamic aspect and even to that childlike thing, but it just isn't, it's not that, it's like it looks, other people seem to be doing it differently. And I just want to say again, there can be different age ranges and it can also look different ways, and you can maybe even love black or love blue or love white. Like it can be something very different, and also activities that might not look particularly little, but it's really about the headspace that it is and whether that resonates, like this, oh yeah, there's a headspace that's more childlike, and that resonates also, that response to a certain way that someone else might be interacting with me in that protective, caring, mentoring, dominant way. And yeah.
You even mentioned a little bit about different age ranges you might feel and how you dress differently. Like even for one person, different parts of them can have different aesthetics. So yeah, there's no one way to do this.
Like words like little, it can feel like a box sometimes. And I think it's important to kind of take the word because it can be empowering to be like, oh, there's a word for this part of me. And it's just a word. We put it on something that's a psychological phenomenon and that's a whole identity. And the box shouldn't limit you. It just helps to find content on this and to connect with other people rather than like confine who you are now. And it can always evolve and it can look different to everybody else, and that's fine.
I always say that about labels in general, no matter what type of dom or type of sub you are. That's just helpful to know what to put into Google to start searching more, but it is not the only thing you are. It doesn't have to be, at least.
Exactly.
But now that we're talking about titles and box, it brings me to middles. In my mind, they're different. Would you differentiate the two? Little space and middle space?
I do, because the headspace also is a little different, for me in my experience at least. I guess as a middle, if you're talking about someone that will connect more with activities and things that are more teenage, this is also a headspace of a brain that is more developed. And obviously we always have a fully developed adult brain since we are adults and we're just entering headspaces. But it is then still a headspace that will be closer to probably your adult self. And I find it's actually a great way sometimes to go into a smaller little space, to first go into a bit more middle and then go younger, because it's closer to the adult brain. So for me, they are different because the headspace feels a bit different, but they are similar because the type of dominant that is being wanted, that is being longed for, or that is being reacted to is generally quite similar, the type of way that is being talked, etc. And also because it's still reverting to a younger age in a way, to a younger headspace.
Like we talked about earlier, the worries, the day-to-day thoughts that sometimes cloud our mind and don't allow us to really relax and be present.
Yeah, and often middles will have maybe more sexuality aspects also pop out, because theoretically that would be an age that has more curiosity for that. And so that can be found more often also, that people who are middle representing online or whatnot might have also a little bit more like sexy pictures and things.
Also, on top of your Instagram, on top of a course, on top of releasing a book, you also have a podcast yourself.
Yeah, but it's small. Like I have only a few episodes for now because it takes forever to edit episodes and to make them. I have answered some questions. People have sent in voice messages, questions, and I've also done now 2 interviews, but there's more coming with other people who have either like a baby girl or a little aspect, or just kind of trying to put more perspectives than just my own on things, and to share more voices and to kind of share also how varied this can be and how this can be lived out by different people. So yeah, there's the Little Spaces podcast. It's called Little Spaces, and it's also under the link littlespaces.co. Everybody can find everything.
You can follow Dove on Instagram at littlespaces.co. If you're looking for the links for these things, it's littlespaces.co into your browser, and Little Spaces podcast on Spotify.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dove, for coming on. I appreciate all of the information you shared. It was really interesting and insightful. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekingconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.